I'm here at the beautiful Jockey Club rooms in Newmarket, one of the oldest venues in racing, to talk about something very new for racing. It's called Championship Racing, and Jeremy's going to explain a little bit more about it. So welcome along, and many thanks for talking to us.
Not at all. Morning.
Let's start with perhaps the obvious question. What exactly is Championship Racing?
It's a new team competition which is going to involve 12 teams, each with a squad of horses, competing in I suppose, something like a Formula One setup. So moving away from an individual, horse racing is obviously very much an individual sport, but we're trying to bring it to a wider audience by using some of the things that work very well in other sports. And so a team-based competition where each team is competing with a defined number of horses over a period of weeks to provide one ultimate winner at the end of an 8-week competition.
And you're looking to be up and running the end of 2019, is that right? We're
looking to launch in at the end of July next year, 2019, and to run on 8 consecutive Thursdays, culminating in the second week of September.
You've obviously found a slot which is currently quite vacant, really. Evening racing seems, if you look at the way cricket has worked, to be a kind of a great place to target in terms of getting people outside of the sport involved.
I think that's right. I've been assured that for a certain generation that Thursday's the new Friday, and that people like to get out and do things on a Thursday evening. We're looking at a sort of almost a twilight to evening slot, so we're starting at 6 o'clock, running through till 8:30, which is great to get terrestrial TV coverage at that time. And then we very much hope, fingers crossed, that we get weather like this next year, and that it runs through a summer period when people are going to enjoy not just the racing, but a whole series of events for a pretty special evening.
I'm sure your detractors have been out to get you and have said that in the past team competitions in racing haven't worked, but this is different, isn't it? Because you're going to have people from outside of the sport sort of as kind of brand owners, is that right?
That's absolutely
Team
right.
owners.
Yes, I think that's right. That there are. I think it's unfair to say that team racing hasn't been successful, in as much that the Sugar Cup, which is the best example, has been a hugely successful one-off event, and there are a number of reasons why that's worked well at Ascot. And really, we were just looking to take the best bits of that and extend it and work out how this format could be successful and engage a whole lot of new people. Inevitably, people are wary of something that is new, and this is, I'm the first to say that this is a small idea that will work if we bring in the expertise of all the various parties that are involved in racing currently. So we've actually had a huge amount of support from the training ranks and the jockey ranks and the owners ranks, and so the race courses as well. That we're going to be holding this on 8 of our top race courses, all Group 1 tracks. I mean, that's a huge sign of support that these bodies are prepared to get behind us and to back it and to make sure that it's a success.
So the tracks that you're involved with, are you able to name any of those?
I probably shouldn't try and name them all directly because they're not all legally tied up, but if you think of the top 10 tracks in the UK by group status and think that we'll be playing on 8 of those, I think it's safe to say that.
The idea being it will move around the country and engage fans from different areas.
Yeah, we were very conscious that we wanted to make sure we get a geographical split, so we want to cover all the courses up in the north of England and the south of England, so that as we move around week to week, we're engaging hopefully a new audience and new fans, as well as racing's existing fans, but making sure that they come from the whole geographical spread.
The nuts and bolts of it, a team will have how many horses?
So each team will comprise 30 horses. It'll be a predefined squad. So if you imagine that 2 weeks before the event starts, you'll be able to see the squads sort of set out in the papers. You'll be able to see what they are, where they've come from, and the team will only be able to choose its runners from that squad. And the point about this is that those squads will be chosen from the handicap pool of horses, which is below pattern class, below listed class, but still towards the top end in terms of ability, and sort of making sure that it's still a highly competitive sporting event that we're putting on. But it's a pool of horses which are invariably the return for owners has never been commensurate in any way with what they're having to put into the sport. We will go into it hoping that our horse is going to turn out to be a Derby winner. We're not always that fortunate. The vast majority inevitably fall short of that standard, and what we're trying to do is have a competition that involves a large pool of horses at a slightly lower level that still provides competitive sport, but is then targeting putting money back into those people who put a lot into the sport already.
So from an owner's point of view, good prize money they can expect. Is there any appearance money?
Yeah, I mean, that's important that there's going to be appearance money. The whole pay structure is to be sorted out. But it's, I mean, one thing we can categorically say is that anybody whose horses are participating in this series, they're not going to be disappointed by the returns. That's absolutely what we're trying. That is the focus of it, bringing new revenue streams into racing by trying to engage brands and companies that in the past haven't got involved with horse racing. We've had to think about initiatives that can bring those people in for the first time. But yes, the money that brings in is absolutely going to make sure that certainly owners at that level of their horses are getting a much better return than they would otherwise get.
I know, as you know, we don't have any betting in Dubai, but you're keen to sort of move it away from betting and gambling, feeling that perhaps racing in the UK is a little bit too tied up with that?
Yes, I mean, I think whenever you run a competition that's in horse racing, there people will want to bet on it. That's always happened, and that's fine. I think what's important with this is that you can just change the emphasis away and say that racing doesn't need betting to be the be-all and end-all about what it's about. There are so many other issues and stories, content that people would find interesting. The people involved in the sport, the jockeys, the stable lads, everything around it, their lives, what the routine is like, getting to know far more about that whole side of things. So we want to just move it away from gambling as be the be-all and end-all. I mean, I don't think many people realise that football is by far the biggest sport that's gambled on. But the way that is presented when you're watching the World Cup now, no one's saying that so-and-so is 7-1 to score a hat-trick, and yet we seem obsessed when we even read the race runners and riders out that we, Cracksman 2-1 favourite, Massarf 7-2 second favourite, whatever it is for each race. And you just want to think, well, do we need to mention those odds the whole time? Maybe we could just introduce the horses, talk about the teams and the riders and the horse themselves rather than being obsessed by betting, and we're very subtly just moving that away from that.
You mentioned the horses, that you want to make the focus on them. Horse welfare is a very important part of what you're doing as well.
I think it's just it's a big story at the moment. There are so many sort of elements that we know of people working very hard on sort of consciously working on areas like horse welfare. We want it to be at the forefront of what we're doing. We've got various initiatives that the way our competition is going to work. Give you one simple example. We're going to be using a Formula 1 style points system. That makes a competition sort of exciting through a whole 8-week period. I know in Formula 1 you end up with 1 or 2 dominant teams. Hopefully that isn't going to be the case to the same extent in this, and I really hope that when we get to week 8 of it, that virtually every team in the league has still got an opportunity of winning it. Now, if you're going to have points all the way down to 10th place in a 12-runner race, it wouldn't look good if horses were being whipped hard for that vital extra point. I think so. For example, we're keen to run under the hands and heels rules that the BHA already have, where you can carry a whip, but you're not using a whip on the horse. I think that's one of the things that racing is obviously looking at in the long term as to if there are any potential changes. We just want to be a test bed for something that might make a difference. It certainly suits our series, and yeah, it's just one of those things that we feel is going to just bring in some people who maybe have been put off the sport in the past, would recognise this as a reason why, hey, that's now I can really love the sport like other people do. One of the main things about this is trying to get the identity of the key people, the personality of the key people in racing, better known to a wider public. I think if I were to ask you to write down the name of one jockey, I think everyone would write down the same name. And what we want to find is that more people over time get to know more jockeys and more trainers and more of the personalities that are involved in the sport. So what we will do is make sure that each team has a designated number of jockeys, almost certainly 4. And in our series, they will only ride for that team. So you will get used to seeing an individual in just that set of colours for each of those races that they ride for that team. So we will, the things that we associate with in other sports where an individual obviously is recognisable in the team colours that he's always worn, that's the kind of thing that we want to get. So yes, we'll have 4 jockeys probably in each team. We've got to make sure we have that number to allow for suspensions, injuries, group races abroad at the same time. But when we announce the teams, we want to announce the squad of horses. We very much want to show the whole racing team, to include the trainers that are involved, to include the jockeys that are involved, so people get a picture about what this is going to be. And the repetitive nature, week in, week out, the consistency of the format is going to be something where people start to recognise you. Hopefully, if you turn on halfway through a race, you start to instantly recognise your team, your colours, your jockey.
Fantastic. But then I suppose with trainers it's a little less straightforward. One team could effectively have 30 different trainers, one for each horse.
Yeah, I mean, in theory that's right. There are practical issues there. What we will, I presumed when we thought about this idea that we would end up with just 12 trainers. And actually talking to the trainers, they were very keen to sort of pair up to get 2, 3, possibly 4 trainers together to put forward a pool of horses. We will have a defined rating band for these horses where they will all, so the pool of horses where each trainer has got a lot of horses in that particular range. So the idea is that while you have the big superpowers in racing, you know, if they're involved, they will very much have a squad probably drawn largely from their own resources. But it doesn't preclude a smaller trainer or a smaller group of trainers getting together who may have 5, 10 horses in that same bracket. They put together a squad of equally competitive horses because by the nature of that system they are of the same rating. And then hopefully, you know, we have a playing field where instead of having 2, 3 superpowers dominating, we get to know 11, 12 teams all with a different angle and all with theoretically an equal chance.
On the subject of jockeys, I know you're keen to promote female jockeys and gender equality.
Yeah, that's another one of the themes that has resonated with the people we've been talking about, how we want this event to look. It's sort of common sense really that racing pushes this element. It's the one advantage it's got over nearly every sport, I suppose, that there is genuine gender equality right through the top training ranks, the top jockey ranks, that really women just haven't necessarily had the same exposure, but they've clearly had, when the opportunity's arisen, they've certainly stood up at all levels. And I think if we get an opportunity via this format to promote that, then that's very exciting. And I know that 1 or 2 brands who have been looking at this about taking a team see that as a strong angle for them, that I suppose they recognise that if they get that right approach, they probably mop up 50% of the fans straight away. So it's a good angle for us to promote, and you know, we don't want to be saying to teams that you've got to have a certain number of women riders or whatever. We want to leave that to the teams, but work the initiative out for themselves that really promotes the gender equality, because the fan base ultimately is going to come very much, if we get new fans, are going to come 50-50 from you know, across the gender spectrum. So.
And just looking at the time frame of things, obviously you're not too long away really from the launch, a year or so. When can we expect to find out some of the teams that have signed up? Okay,
so I think that's the information that will come out between now and the end of the year. I think it's important, we obviously know some of those teams already, and we're in discussion with a whole range of and a very broad range of teams, as I said to you, from different countries, from different industries. I think we need to get to the final makeup of the 12 to make sure that all are happy, that they're all happy to race together. You know, there's no point in me coming up with half a dozen teams and then filling it in with, you know, a few of my friends or the local house builder or whatever, which wouldn't necessarily sit well with some of the other brands that are there. So it's important that with the calibre of all of ours, at the final sort of working out of these 12, that we go with 12 brands that. And bear in mind this is kicking off the event, we've got to make sure that there's a certain wow factor that as well what we put together, and you know, we're confident of doing that.